Here's the reality. Leadership is not that effing hard. You are making it harder, and matter of fact, a lot of your wounds are self-inflicted. Let's talk about ways to stop it and regain control. Most people wake up and think that they're confined. They have their own invisible tethers to their career or their job. You don't. You could stop it today if you wanted. I believe if you think that you're stuck, you're stuck. I believe if you think you have choices, you're gonna find a way to have choices. I believe that you will attract information that will lead to your belief system. I'm Chad Carden, founder of the Carden Group, and I help leaders across the globe, have been doing it for the past 25 years, to really regain control, understand what matters, create their own environment, and live into it that minimizes the frustration, minimizes the stress, and sets them up for a higher probability of success. Before we dive too much into this, let me set some context around this and why leadership is so effing hard. There's been studies done that show, Harvard Review did this study that showed that 60% of CEOs, this is kind of scary, but I kind of like it, 60% of CEOs admit that they fully do not know what they're doing in their role. 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. 70% of leaders feel like they're just trying to keep their head above water. They're trying to fake it till they make it. There's middle managers that are burnt the hell out. So if you feel like you're one of those leaders that's just faking it till you make it, join the club. It's not a departure from the norm. It's okay. But what shifts can we make to make it even better for ourselves and set ourselves up for a higher probability of success? Let's get into that. Let me walk you through my framework that can help remove the stress and the chaos in your world that set yourself up for a higher probability of success. Let's get into this. First thing is understanding most of our wounds are self-inflicted. We make it harder. Leadership isn't that hard. A career isn't that hard. A job isn't that hard. Realizing how to regain control is the first step in this. So the first thing to realize is control your controllables. Control your controllables, meaning what can you control? You might not be able to control your boss. You can't control everything. You can influence a lot of things, but you can't control everything. So stop trying to control the things that you can't control. You might not be able to control your boss. You might not be able to control the way people react to certain things, but what can you control as a leader? Figure out those things, control those controllables, and let everything else play out. You can try to influence. Influence is different than control. Controlling means, we always talk about this, but sometimes we all have a brand, which just means how we're perceived by others. We can't always control it because I could do everything right and somebody not like me. I could do everything wrong and somebody's going to still protect me, but I can't influence it by how I show up, how I handle stress, how I present my ideas. So we can influence things, but there's certain things that we just can't control. So stop trying to focus on those things and control your own controllables. The next step is to, once you understand what you can control, just call timeout. Calling timeout really has two facets. One, defining, and two, options. Let me walk through each one of those so you can understand it. So really defining for you, how do you want to show up? What does success look like for you? What is important for you in a career? What leads to engagement? What leads to fulfillment? What leads to energy? You can have those defined and really create that and then live into it. Most people are walking around unconscious. There was a study done that says 95% of our day is unconscious. 95%, we do things and we don't even think about them. We're not intentional about it. Calling time out allows you to assess, refocus, reset, reimagine by defining truly what it is you want out of your role, out of your career, out of your job. So taking time to just call time out and think about those things. There's a lot of videos that I do that go deeper into that. You can check those out, but that's the first thing is definition. The second part of calling time out is exploring your options. See, here's the fallacy. The fallacy is people don't think they have choice. You have choice every single day. Most people wake up and think that they're confined. They have their own invisible tethers to their career or their job. You don't. You could stop it today if you wanted. You could literally go in another direction today. You have convinced yourself. You've created these walls that aren't even there, but you believe they're there and you live into those things. I believe that when you set up those fake walls, when you set up those invisible walls, you live in that box. It reminds me of a of a story about a guy told a story from stage one time, talked about that there was a bear in a cage, and the cage was 10 foot long. And every day they would put the food at one end and the bear at the other. And every day the bear would walk 10 feet and eat. He'd go back over and lay down, walk 10 feet and eat, go back over and lay down. Did that for years in a zoo. Everybody would watch him. They removed the cage one day, 10 foot forward, the bear would go over and eat. Go back without bars. 10 foot forward, the bear would go over and eat. Go back without bars. Now here's what's scary. They moved the food 15 feet away from the bear. The bear went 10 feet and stopped. So many people in life have these fallacies that they don't have choice, that they're stuck. You're not stuck. So let's just explore some of the options right now. Let's assume that you're not happy. Let's assume that you are stressed. You're confused. You just don't know where the direction is. You're making it harder than what it is. Not all these options are good options, but they're options. Option one is you live with it. Just live with it. You live with your environment. You live with the reality. You accept it. It is what it is. I'm gonna be here till I retire. Stop trying to fight it. If you're not gonna change, then stop trying to fight it. Just accept it. If you have 11 more years before you retire, or I hear people say I got just 15 more years and I can retire, or the benefits are too good, then stop about it and just accept it. Right? That's an option. Just accept it. Another option on the other side of that pendulum is leave. Quit. Go find something else. Go find another role that you're going to live into, that you're going to be fulfilled with. We recently sat down with a leader who has been a leader for over 16 years. She removed herself from her position and went into a staff role. She's more fulfilled. She's more engaged. She doesn't have the headaches. She doesn't have the people challenges. She doesn't have the operational challenges. She goes in, she does her job. She can check in and check out. She doesn't have to live with it for 24 hours a day. So you could leave. Just find something else. So those are two, obviously, I'm not saying they're good options, but they're options. Another option is you get back to going to my first step, which is controlling the controllables. What can you change? How can you communicate? How can you change your relationships? How can you reset expectations? How can you redefine what brings energy for you? How can you do those that's another option. Another option is there might be another possible avenue for you in the same organization where you're not losing your years of service, or you're not losing your benefits, or you're not losing. We work with large organizations, public and private, and we always say that there's 50 careers inside those organizations. There are 50 careers inside those organizations, and most organizations today are looking for people to fill those seats. Are there other options within your current employer? Are there other options within your space? So ultimately, when you call timeout, define what it is that you want and explore all your options. What are all your options? And don't discount any of the options. You never know. If you take the first step, that opening that door, it might lead to a whole nother environment that creates engagement and fulfillment and allows you to create your environment and walk into it. So think about controlling the controllables and calling timeout. If you are serious about truly creating the future in your environment and living into it, I have a tool that is perfect for you. It's our framework for success. It will walk you through crafting and getting clear around your vision and creating a game plan that allows you to live into that vision. It's at thedesignleader.com. I'll put the link below. The next thing that makes leadership so effing hard, or our career or our role so effing hard, is communication. There's a fallacy out there that communication actually exists. It doesn't. Most of us are not communicating. We think we're communicating. We think what we say makes sense, but how they're interpreting it and what's going into their minds is something completely different. It leads to misalignment. It leads to uncommunicated expectations. It leads to lack of clarity around goals and vision. It leads to not understanding purpose. And that makes our job more difficult because as leaders, we play cleanup. We're always cleaning up. We're always fighting fires versus preventing fires. And so when it comes to communication, realizing that communication is one aspect that can alleviate 80% of your challenges and issues that are making leadership so effing hard. Keeping that in mind. So here's a couple things to think about when communicating. Number one, there's a difference. And I know there's more content on this, but there's a difference between hearing and listening. When we're communicating, it makes complete sense, but you got to think about the audience. Are they hearing and are they listening? Hearing means it goes one ear and not the other. Listening means that they're taking it in. There's a difference between listening and understanding. People can take it in, but it doesn't make sense to them. Most of the time, they won't tell us. They'll say it makes perfect sense. They'll walk away and go, what in the hell's going on? Like, I don't get it. Right? So if I can get people to hear and listen and understand, there's a difference between understanding and agreeing. right? Somebody can understand, but they think I'm dead wrong. Most of the time they won't tell me. They'll walk away, they'll tell me they're completely on board, and they'll go tell somebody else that I'm crazy, I'm nuts. If I can get them to agree, I have to get them to believe they can do it. A lot of times in organizations when we're communicating, we can get people to hear, we can get people to listen, we can get people to understand, we can get people to agree, but then their thought process is, how the hell are we gonna do it? We don't have the resources, we don't have the budget, you're asking me to do more with less. How are we going to actually do it? And the last layer of communication is if we can get them to believe, if we can remove that apostrophe T from can't to can, the last one is are we actually going to change and implement? So when we're communicating a message, it's not just about communicating it. It's about making sure that we get to actual implementation and people do something with that message. There's a whole myriad of vehicles that you can, I have other videos. If you go to thedesignleader.com, there's a bunch of free resources. There's just so much more information out there on communication, but realizing that there's many layers to communication. Another thing about communication is that understanding that once isn't enough. It's an ongoing, never-ending cycle. You can't tell somebody one thing in January and expect that they remember it in October. There's so much noise and so many things going on. You have to consistently communicate what it is you want from your people. Consistently communicate your expectations and your goals. Consistently communicate and understand what they need from you and their expectations of you. It's a two-way street. So when it comes to communication, that's another thing that's making leadership so effing hard that we can minimize. We'll never completely solve it, but we can minimize it by understanding communication. Another element to this formula is once I understand what's right for me, once I understand what environment I want to live into, then I begin to implement and take action to actually live into that. So how do I take the right steps to control what I can control to create an environment that actually leads to more engagement, more fulfillment, less stress, less confusion, less headache, less hassle, all those things, even if it's selfishly for me. I'm not saying that it's a zero-sum game where I have to win and somebody else has to lose, but what am I doing to actually implement and change? A lot of us don't change. We live in this comfort zone, and when we do something that's too uncomfortable, we jump right back into it. We have to challenge ourselves to get outside our comfort zone and do something different. That's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same things over and over and over and expecting different results. What are we doing to actually implement and make changes once we understand what we control, once we define what's important to us, once we look at all of our options? What are we doing to make shifts? And how are we shifting? The big or small, it doesn't matter as long as you're making progress. An inch or a mile, as long as you're moving in the direction that leads to more fulfillment, more engagement, and less headache and hassle and stress for you. So implement these things, track these things, understanding how to show up every single day. That's key. And as you track, here's one that people shy away from is audit. Audit what it is you're doing. Audit what changes you have made. Audit what impact it's having and make mid-course adjustments when necessary. Every game plan that we're going to implement that helps set ourselves up for a higher probability of success and minimizes the stress and frustration with leadership or your career or your role, every plan should be built with sway. It reminds me of the Bay Bridge, right? I used to travel to San Francisco all the time for clients, and we would go sometimes from San Francisco to Oakland, and there's that Bay Bridge right there. Not the Golden Gate, the Bay Bridge. The Bay Bridge, I think in '87, they had that big earthquake, and the Bay Bridge collapsed. When they rebuilt that thing, they rebuilt it with sway, which means they rebuilt it with movability each side, forward, backwards, because when the next earthquake hit, they wanted that bridge to be able to absorb that earthquake and not crumble like it did in I think it was 87. So your plans have to be built with sway. Sometimes when we begin to implement what we thought about happened in theory, it just doesn't make sense. I used to live in Los Angeles. I would think in theory it made sense to take the red eye to New York. When I would go, we had a client in New York. I lived in New York 2 weeks out of the month. In theory, it makes sense. You leave LA about 11:15 at night. You land in New York about 6:30 in the morning. You can go right from LaGuardia or JFK, wherever you're flying into, go down to Midtown Manhattan and, maybe check into a hotel, maybe get a couple hours of sleep, maybe refresh up a little bit and then hit your meetings. It made sense in theory. When you begin to implement, it didn't make sense. I would land every single time. Like, what the hell am I thinking? Like, ultimately that plan didn't play out. So I had to make mid-course adjustments. So ultimately building it with sway, implement, track, audit, make mid-course adjustments. And then ultimately How you reduce leadership being so effing hard is you truly take the time to shift. You make shifts intentionally that allow you to minimize. I've said this in multiple videos, but my good friend Adam Carroll always talks about pole vaulting over mouse turds. Our wounds are self-inflicted. I'm telling you, mine too. We make bigger deals out of things that aren't that big of a deal. We create these scenarios. 80% of our thoughts are negative. That's what the research shows. How do we shift that? How do we begin to implement? How do we take action? And how do we change? As I talk about all the time, I'm not immune to any of this. My leadership styles and frustration is a roller coaster ride the majority of the time. I'm probably one of those people that 50% of the time I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I am confident though that I'll figure it out. There have been times as the organization has grown that my leadership approach has led to an adverse impact or adverse results of what I wanted. A lot of times I will have expectations in my mind and I don't fully communicate those expectations. And uncommunicated expectations will create pre-planned resentment. For example, I believe that everybody should operate how I operate. That's just, and I'm coming to the realization that I'm coming to the acceptance that that's just not the case. But I do my best work from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. every single day. I get more done in that time than a lot of people get done in a week. That's just me. Sometimes after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm not that productive. I know what I call is my green time versus red time. I heard that from one of our clients. I know my green time. I know my red time. So I expect everybody, not that they should be working from 4 to 8, but I'm also very efficient at response times. My text response, my email response, my phone, getting people back to phone calls, I am probably to a detriment. I get back to people quickly or I respond quickly. If an email comes in for one of my team members from a client, I expect them to get back probably in 5 seconds. Right? That's my expectation. You should respond to that. Matter of fact, there's stuff in my inbox right now that I know some of my team should be responding to. They're not responding to it, and it just boils on my frustration. Again, I've made it harder because I haven't communicated that. I haven't negotiated reality. I haven't set parameters. That's just in my own mind. I'm putting my expectations onto other people, and they're not fulfilling them, not because they don't want to, it's because they don't know. And sometimes I get frustrated at people, and they don't even realize that I'm getting frustrated at them. So I am making a conscious effort right now to put more things on the table, to put more things in the arena that we talk about, and just creating negotiated expectations on when we should get back to clients. What are the expectations on turn times with emails and summaries and some of the things that we do with these meetings? That's the true essence that's also allowing me internally to really accept the fact that not everybody operates like I operate. Not everybody has the same mentality. Maybe people think a 1-day turn is more reasonable than a 1-minute turn. And so those are the things that we're working through as an organization as we grow. But I, for years, have created those self-inflicted wounds because I've just held that in versus communicating that. So if you're one out there every single day, and by the way, I also believe that the law of attraction works 100% of the time. I believe if you think this whole message is BS, it's going to be BS. I believe if you think that you're stuck, you're stuck. I believe if you think you have choices, you're going to find a way to have choices. I believe that you will attract information that will lead to your belief system. I believe we seek it. I believe we seek out information that creates self-fulfilling prophecies. So ultimately, it's up to you. It starts with mindset. What can you shift? What can you do and think about? What actions can you take? What habits can you change that lead to a different result that minimizes that leadership is so effing hard? Your career is so effing hard. Your job is so effing hard. You have options. You have choices. You can control it. Figure out what that is. Take the first step today. If this helped you on your leadership journey, watch my next video on 3 questions every leader must ask. It helps you gain clarity around what truly is fulfillment to you and allows you to set yourself up for even more fulfillment moving forward.